Welcome to Containerized Conversations, where we try to containerize our conversation. I'm Jessica Caffarelli.
And I'm Josh Warhurst. Thanks for tuning in as we dive into some of our favorite topics, one containerized thought at a time.
Welcome back, listeners. Josh and I have been just talking in circles without recording, and I just
Not
hit the
talking in
record button.
circles. We've been making points. We've been coming to conclusions. We've just been saying things that shouldn't necessarily be recorded.
So, Hail Mary. Have you seen it?
No.
Oh.
But what's
Have you
the
read
guy?
it?
No.
Oh, Josh, you're killing me.
But The Martian. I read
Yeah.
The Martian. I loved the movie.
You're killing me.
What's the author's name?
Andy Weiss, I think. Isn't that
Andy
what it is?
Weir? I don't know.
And Andy Weir. Yeah, Hail Mary.
Anyways,
you haven't watched the movie. You haven't read the book. Well, I got nothing to talk to you about. All right, I guess episode over. I don't know.
No, hold on. It's not over. It's not over. It ain't over till it's over. Here's the thing. What's your opinion on hard science fiction?
I mean, so and this is the problem and thing with Hail Mary. I think they do both a good and terrible job of depicting science. And like I do think I didn't look this up. I don't know. Like I do think whoever wrote the book has some sort of tie-ins with science because the main character is a science teacher.
Don't quote me on this, but I think the author of the book works at NASA or worked at NASA.
He must have some sort of tie.
He definitely has a big science background.
In the book, he goes into detail. I'm trying not to like ruin the book movie for people, so I'm gonna try to keep it like. Well, I'm gonna say we're gonna try to be no spoilers, but there might be spoilers. Be careful where you tread. But he's the main character is a science teacher, a high school science teacher, and so like there's a part of the book where he's like trying to do science experiments, and he like goes into in the book he goes into detail about gravity and how fast gravity goes, and he calculates how fast gravity goes to like figure out some sort of problem that he's in. And so there's a lot of detail in there, and they do a good job, and I liked it because it felt real, but I hated it because there was so much focus on the science of gravity that like I just didn't think was necessarily important. It was almost like he wrote it to prove he knew science, bro. Of course I know science, bro. So that's my take on it. That's my take.
My general feeling, so there's two kinds of science fiction, right? In my mind.
Yeah.
There's sort of soft science fiction and hard science fiction, right?
Yeah.
Soft science fiction is Star Wars, right? Where it really borders on fantasy. It's basically like, yeah, we have this like world where there's robots and they can do anything, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of taking that saying that like, science to somebody who's sufficiently not aware of science is the same as magic, right? I forget the exact quote, but you know where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Science is basically magic, right?
Yeah.
And so Star Wars is basically fantasy, right? And so soft science fiction and fantasy are kind of the same. It's just like an aesthetic choice, right?
Yeah.
So, Lord of the Rings, if you make it so that the ring is actually something that like changes your DNA and is actually some like, object from an alien civilization, you can actually change this story into a science fiction story if you change the setting, right?
Yeah.
Oh, Sauron is actually an alien from another planet, and he brought this thing down instead of like he was an ancient one who did this thing, right?
Yeah.
I haven't read Lord of the Rings either, so I'm sorry if I butchered any of that.
Oh no.
But science fiction is kind of in the same boat where if you go soft enough, it kind of just becomes fantasy. We're saying, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
People have lightsabers. They're basically
Yeah,
just
man.
swords, right?
Yeah.
Magic
Well,
swords.
and, like, the Force
Yep.
is it's like that. That's magic. That's not
Yeah.
anything to
Or
do with
God, right? You could
science
say the
fiction.
force is kind of
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
ethereal, holy
And so
element, right?
yeah, I get what you're saying. That's like soft science fiction because
Hard science
this
fiction to the to your point, and actually Project Hail Mary is probably the softest of Andy's books, if we got the
yeah.
author's name right.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, like The Martian is way more in the hard science fiction, where you can say
Yeah.
everything in this book is kind of realistic. It's based
Yeah.
in things that have happened.
Yeah.
And if it's not realistic, they're kind of explaining their way around it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Hard
yeah.
science fiction is still science fiction. It hasn't happened. It's not fact.
Yeah.
Um, but it's close enough where somebody who's involved in the world
Yeah.
could actually go and say, yeah,
Okay.
that would happen.
So
Right.
that's actually that definition I think is looser than what I was thinking.
Mm.
Because in my mind, hard science fiction was like they actually can tie this to real science
Uh-huh.
in some way, shape, or form. But I actually think with your definition of hard science fiction, it's like, does this science fiction content rely on technology to drive the plot, or is it something more mystical? And if
Mm.
it's something more mystical with like advanced technology thrown in there, then it's soft sci-fi versus hard sci-fi. So like,
Yeah.
so here's my
That,
question: is like
that's a good
Battlestar,
summary of my
yeah,
point,
Battlestar Galactica.
which I
Have you
haven't
watched?
seen.
All right. So I think I think your definition of hard science fiction covers Battlestar Galactica because like that whole the plot of that was that we built, AI robots that basically tried to destroy humans, but we were far enough into the future where humans could go to other galaxies essentially.
Uh-huh.
And so like the robots like took over Earth, but we like kind of just flew away from Earth, and then we're still trying to fight this like this robotic people, right? Because then they became a whole robotic thing, and we're trying to like, but there was no like hard explanation of science in there, right? They didn't try to put you through some sort of science lesson, but the whole thing was driven through advanced science, right? There was no mysticism. So, in essence, you could see this being a reality of a future like 1,000 years from now, right?
Right. So like there's sort of like a science Play-Doh, like somewhere between hard and soft.
Yeah, yeah,
Um
yeah,
uh the science Newtonian fluid, right? Like
yeah, yeah,
I do think that like true soft science fiction is like Star Wars,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
They don't really care about explaining how anything
yeah,
works, right?
yeah. Like
They're
a
more
crystal can create a laser that stops midair.
yeah,
Like,
you
okay,
need the crystal. You
yeah,
need
the
the
crystal
crystal.
stops it. Yeah. Okay, that
But
yeah, yeah.
but
It's the
that's
force
basically
that stops it, you know?
totally soft science fiction.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then I think something that's
So it's a sliding
harder,
scale. It's a
like
sliding scale.
really hard, is probably on the side of The Martian, which you say
Yeah.
this could happen today, right? Or
Yeah,
this
yeah.
could happen in 10 years, right?
And like Star Trek, I think Star Trek is closer to harder, right?
It's
It's not
harder.
fully into, teaching you the speed of gravity, but they do have science lessons in there every once in a while that can get kind of boring.
Yeah, I well, I feel like Star Trek is actually like the setting by itself is more on the side of like this is like far enough in the future where we take this stuff for granted, so that's why we're not
Yeah, yeah,
explaining it, right? We don't have to
yeah,
explain how teleportation works.
yeah,
We
yeah,
just have it.
yeah, yeah.
Um
Which is
and
possible. It could be possible.
yes. Yeah, I think there is something
depending on
there.
our technology, yeah.
Um, but
What was that movie? There was a movie that I'm pretty sure was based on a book or something. Who was the, main character of, like, Grease Lightning? Uh,
you
uh,
got me.
oh, God, wait, now I need to
So,
look this up.
another movie I would say is actually in the realm of hard science fiction. It's not a movie,
Yeah.
it's, have you ever seen Three Body Problem?
Yes. Yes,
Three Body
that's another
Problem
one, that's another good one.
Three Body Problem is somewhere in, like, the harder science fiction, right?
Okay,
Because
before you go,
sure, sure.
I figured it out. Battlefield Earth. Did you ever watch Battlefield Earth?
No.
Nope. No. No. Josh, how do I we need to do, like, a sci-fi theater. What was the old TV
It's
show
Mystery
Sci-Fi
Science
Theater?
Theater 3000?
Yes,
Yeah.
but it's me and you in the front row. We're watching these movies because, dude, Battlefield Earth, that's another one where I think is, like, closer to the hard end of the scale,
Oh,
and
really?
they lost everyone. They lost everyone. It got terrible reviews, nobody liked it. Like, I'm looking at it right now, 3% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh my goodness. Let's
Yeah,
watch it.
a
Let's watch it.
2.5 IMDb, like, it was bad, and I partly because I think they did a bad job filming it, but also, it was like a super hard sci-fi movie in a time where people didn't want a super hard sci-fi movie,
Yep,
and
yep,
so, like, I do think if it came out, like, now, I think people would have liked it a little bit more
yep.
than when it did come out. Like, when did it come out? Came out, oh, it's based on a novel from 1982, so 100% it was based and it came out in the year 2000. So it was, like,
Interesting.
around that time where people wanted sci-fi film, but they didn't want the super hard sci-fi films. They wanted, like, the softer, because this was around Battlestar Galactica, and so people
Yeah,
were trying to feel out that area of, like, "Alright, like, how hard can we go?"
right.
Like,
And something that I think is really quite in the middle
Yeah.
is The Matrix, right?
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah,
think The
yeah.
Matrix is definitely
That's a good
it's
one.
because they don't really explain the hardness, right? But
Yeah,
it also is kind of like in a future world where like, oh yeah, the robots need
yeah,
electricity and humans have the electricity. And actually the
yeah,
original concept was harder
yeah,
because it was actually about like
yeah,
how humans connecting were actually kind of like an internet that
yeah,
the
yeah,
machines were using. And they're like, we got to dumb this down to make it softer for people.
yeah,
That's the understanding that I have. I'm sure
yeah.
there's a Matrix expert in the
Well,
audience who's like,
and
actually, you're
and so
wrong, but
you're onto something here because The Matrix came out in '99.
yep,
So, like, I'm sure the people who made this, Battlefield Earth was, like, trying to essentially capture on that, like, sci-fi trend. So there must have been a sci-fi trend in the
yeah,
late '90s, early 2000s that everybody was trying to capture on. And, like, I just don't think they realized that there was this, like, people didn't want that, and almost like, "You know what? I'm gonna change our thing." So we're saying it's like like, a
a
2D,
spectrum,
a 1D, a spectrum, but I actually think it's like an
a
XY graph.
grid.
Yeah, it's an XY graph. And so on the X-axis, it's like how much, technology driven is the storyline.
Mm,
So 0 is, like, in the middle, and then to the left, it's, like, you know, mysticism driven, like
yep.
Star Wars, and then to the right, it's technology driven, like Hail Mary, but then, like, the up and down is, like, realism, right? How realistic is this idea versus how unrealistic is this idea? And, like,
Mm,
that's the thing is, like, The Matrix, I feel like The Matrix is, like, into I would say maybe, like, halfway into, like, hard tech versus non-hard tech. Like, a lot of
yep.
it is driven, but, like, Neo has special powers, which I think brings it more closer to
Into
the
the
center, right?
yeah.
It's only in The Matrix, not outside well, kind of not outside the
There
matrix.
he is kind of a Jesus character. He is kind of
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
savior where it's like,
yeah, yeah,
"Oh, we need
yeah,
him exactly, not
yeah,
for, like, a good reason, but just
yeah.
because
But
we
it's
need
like
s." Yeah.
I feel like it's more unrealistic because, like, using the human body as a, battery to
Mhm.
power AI, like, I don't know how realistic that is. So that it's, in the more unrealistic realm in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Versus The Martian, I feel like The Martian is still on the technology side, like the realism sci-fi, but it's real. So it's actually above the graph. It's both in realistic, uh, territory, very realistic territory, and very sci-fi territory, right? And
Yeah.
so it's, like, up there,
But I would
right?
say it's slightly on the it's not as hard as The Martian,
Not
right?
as hard, yeah, yeah. Well, no,
Because
that's what I was talking about, The Martian,
right.
where,
You're right. You're right.
Hail Mary, yeah, yeah. Like, so Hail Mary, I think, is actually towards unrealistic
Mm.
because depending on your viewpoint on if aliens actually exist and if they did, because Hail Mary has like
Spoilers.
sorry, yeah,
Oh, it's fine.
there are alien races in Hail Mary, so like it does enter into the more unrealistic, but maybe it's more towards the center because we can't really know either way, so they're playing it safe, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, The Martian though, The Martian is like hardcore. I feel like into realism. Right? I can grow potatoes in my own poop if I wanted to.
Right, right.
Like, yeah, like, that is technically something you can do, right?
Right, and the problems that you're being faced are like, "Oh, that's an actual problem that
Yeah,
somebody
yeah.
who's on Mars would
Plants
face."
can grow or air. So, hypothetically speaking, if you can get a greenhouse going on Mars, then maybe you can survive depending on what technology is available for you to grow plants on Mars. Like that is a somewhat realistic, right? And so
Right.
it's up in that
The
one,
top
2, 3,
quadrant,
4,
whatever.
the
Yeah.
second quadrant up there, Like yeah. And Battlefield Earth, on the other hand, I feel like is like firmly cemented down in like way far on the fourth quadrant where it's both unrealistic but driven in really hardcore sci-fi and
Mm.
people were just like nah bro, I just don't want this, I just don't want this.
I wanna watch this movie now with you. This sounds great.
Yeah, yeah,
I I will say that, like, in general, I can go either way with hard science fiction because, I used to really be into this podcast called Writing Excuses, which
yeah, yeah.
was, Brandon Sanderson was one of the hosts, but it
Oh,
was
okay.
basically a podcast about writing, and they made a strong point, which was like, "Okay, it doesn't really matter how hard or soft you go in your science fiction. It all matters if people actually wanna read about the characters, and
Yeah,
ultimately, this ends up being about the characters, right?
yeah,
You can have the best setting in the world, and if the characters are cardboard, then people don't really care about it,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And I think that's like, you can have a world like that where, with a movie, it can kind of work because you can kinda turn your brain off for, like,
yeah,
an hour and a half.
yeah, yeah,
It's not a big deal. But if you're gonna
yeah,
be reading for, like, 10 hours a book, right, then you need to be engaged. And a
yeah.
lot of this comes down to characters, and it's not the setting, but it's really easy to talk about the setting because you know what? It's the first thing that draws you to it, right? When you
And
think
maybe
about
that's
Interstellar, right, some people think about the scene on the water planet, or they
yeah,
think about the scene on the
yeah.
the desert Earth, right, where there's, like, dust
Interstellar, man.
everywhere,
Yeah. I
right?
feel like I need
Or
to
they think
watch
about
that
the
again.
final scene, right? I mean
I saw that once, and I remember liking it,
hmm,
and I haven't seen it again. I feel like I need to watch it again.
you
And
should.
that's the thing, like, I think with that movie, right, it had nothing to do with whether or not it was super tech or super realistic or not. It was that they explored an idea that I don't think many sci-fi films explored,
Mhm.
which was time dilation, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, I don't know if there was another movie that did that. at least not as good as they did in that one.
Yeah, and I'll agree, like, when I think about that movie, that is the biggest thing about the movie,
Yeah,
right, is,
yeah,
a friend of mine, the movie came out while I was in Japan, and they talked about how their experience like, they cried in that movie, and
yeah,
because it was kind of like talking about they took it as their experience in Japan, right?
yeah,
Because while they were in Japan, they were seeing all these events happen in somebody else's life go by, right?
yeah,
And that they connected to that point, right?
yeah,
And it wasn't necessarily the characters, although there's
yeah,
some fun stuff, right? It
yeah,
wasn't necessarily the setting. It was like that thing that they connected to was the thing that
yeah,
was like literally their life at that moment
yeah,
and was a major point in the movie, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah. There's only one other movie I can think of that played around with the idea of time dilation, which was
the Super
the
Mario Brothers movie from
no,
1980. No.
no, even more random, the Adam Sandler movie Click.
Mm.
Did you see
Uh,
that? Did you see that?
no, I've never seen it, but I
You
know.
haven't seen Click? I can't do a podcast with you anymore. I give up. I
Wait,
need to find
you've seen
someone else.
Groundhog Day, right?
No, I can't. Yes, but that wasn't time dilation. That was time repeatism. All right, I don't know. Just flow with me for a second. That like there wasn't like a control in time. That was a control loop, right? A repeat loop. That's different. Everyone
That's
does
not
loops. That's a time loop.
everyone does
That's
lips.
nothing new. No, time dilation, that's different. And, like, and that's the thing is, like, I almost feel like, because like, you could also argue Back to the Future, right? That's another obvious one. But, like, Back to the Future, I feel like that they had way more control, right? In how much they forward or backward, they were just dumb and didn't gas up their car before they fully did it. Versus like in Click or like these other like
Interstellar,
or
like it happens.
Interstellar, like they didn't have full control, right?
Yep,
In Click, he had control to fast forward, but he didn't realize he didn't have full control to get back, and also he didn't necessarily he, like, lost control of the controller as it went through, and then Interstellar, same idea, like, when they landed on the planet, they didn't have control over time. It was just this was a property that they had to deal with,
yep.
and I think that's what made it so unique, in a sense. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Man, I can't believe you haven't seen Click, dude. Jesus
I
Christ.
what I've
Every time
learned is that I
every
gotta
time
see
every time the
Click,
Cranberries comes on, I
Battlefield Earth.
cry my eyes out, and it's because of Click. Every time Cranberries plays.
Hey,
I
Cranberries
can't
is great.
believe okay, well, I guess we know what the new series of this damn podcast is gonna be.
It's
It's
our spin-off
mystery
podcast,
yeah.
Mystery Science Theater
Mystery
300.
containerized theater 4000.
Jesus, we gotta think of a better name than this.
And that was our containerized conversation. I'm Jesse Caffarelli.
I'm Josh Warhurst. Have a great night.